Welcome back to the CB Brothers podcast. Today we are going to explore a new world and a new story. We have touched on Star Wars and pulp heroes, which we will return to in future videos. But first we're going to explore the wizarding world of Harry Potter. Over the last 30 years, Harry Potter has appeared and dominated the fictional world, drawing many into the world of fiction and reading, first in books, then in short stories, then in movies, spin-off books, video games, board games, attractions, theme parks, and an ever-increasing reach of merchandise. Several years ago, we considered Harry Potter and the world it spawned, noticing some inconsistencies. Don't get us wrong, we love the world, but we realized that some of these inconsistencies could allow us to tell other stories. This is where the idea of the fifth house was born. I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, leave a comment. If you don't, leave a comment. Let's talk about the wizarding world, the fifth house. First off, before we get started, I want to really quickly touch on the fact that this story is broken down into 3 parts, similar to how books and novels have 3 books or parts within them, telling one cohesive story, but just breaking down each part. So we will be covering part 1 in this video, and then part 2 and 3 in the next video, just as a general reference of information. In the first half of 2023, Hoffnung, Hoops, Ellie Billish, and Miles Dowtrey received their letters to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. They and other new and old students boarded the Hogwarts Express and traveled by train to the castle. With the change of the century and Muggle technologies, witches and wizards had changed how they boarded and moved about platform 9 3/4, but without much trouble they traveled to the campus. Wizards had adopted many of the modern technologies Muggles had created and become less connected to each other. The magic in these wizarding homes operated weirdly and differently than it had in the past due to this merger of technology and magic. There were fewer and fewer people using house elves, thanks to the laws passed by Hermione Granger Weasley to free the elves, and therefore caused this to be even a possibility. This year's student body was bigger than it had been in the past several years. Around 150 students lined up in the Great Hall of Hogwarts to take part in the sorting ceremony. It had been a tradition hundreds of years, dating all the way back to the start of the school. Each student would have the magical sorting hat placed upon them, and it would sort each of the students into one of the 4 houses, namely Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Slytherin, and Ravenclaw. When the sorting got to Ellie Billish, the sorting hat did something unheard of. It called her into the house Briarbuck. Young Ellie looked back at the teacher standing there holding the roll of students and the sorting hat. Unsure of what to do next, the teacher instructed Ellie to just simply stand by them. At the great table, the headmistress, Professor McGonagall, and the deputy headmaster, Professor Longbottom, began to discuss what could be happening. The whole hall was quiet as the rest of the students were sorted. Miles, Hoffnung, and 27 other students were sorted into this new house. Deputy Headmaster / Professor Longbottom quickly stood up and ushered the 30 students into a room adjacent to the Great Hall, while Headmistress McGonagall calmed the other students. With her wisdom and experience, she calmed the students and the whole school, giving a speech about new horizons and how changes were a blessing of life. These Briarbuck students, confused and worried, tried to converse while they waited for Professor McGonagall. Professor Longbottom calmed the children with a story or 2 of his adventures into the unknown when he was a boy at Hogwarts. Many of them knew his history and respected him. The stories did a great deal to calm their fears. Many thought maybe they had done something wrong and this was punishment. A short time later, Headmistress McGonagall, Madam Hooch, Professor Hagrid, and others came into the room and began discussing about what to do with this fifth house, House Briarbuck. After talking for a few minutes, they asked the Sorting Hat what it was doing. The hat replied that a great danger was coming and a new house with new views and ideas was needed to stop the danger for both the wizarding world and the Muggle world. Professor Longbottom stepped forward and suggested that they follow the hat's advice and try something new, commenting that the hat had always steered him in the right direction. He suggested this new house, Briarbuck, could be taught different versions of magic from the different wizarding schools. They could have wizarding professors come in and teach different strengths from the other schools around the world, specifically noting the wandless magic cast at Ouagadougou in Africa. Professor Longbottom even offered to be the head of house for this fifth house of Hogwarts. Side note, for those of you wondering, we did come up with some details about the house that are not pertinent to the story. House Briarbuck, their house color would be purple, their house animal would be the stag, and the house element would be spirit. Realizing they were going to be a small house, but a house nonetheless, the students began introducing themselves and making groups of friends. Hoffnung, Ellie, and Miles found each other and decided to become friends, since there was no one else reaching out to any of them. Hoffnung had a predisposition toward protective spells and defense. She was from a family who used runic magic along with their spells as a protective form of magic with their home, drawing from other or older forms of magic. Ellie loved charms, and over the next several months came up with the idea to mount wand onto an armband, mixing magic and wandless magic to create something more powerful and unique to her. Miles loved to experiment with spells and magic. He'd even tried to create his own spells a time or two before coming to school. As the school year began, there were a few odd things that started to happen regarding food at Hogwarts, but no one paid them real mind. About 6 months into their first year, Miles came up with a crazy idea to graft his wand between the radius and ulna of his right arm. This had a strange magical effect on his arm and connected his wand to his natural arcana and made him learn and master spells much faster. Over time, though, his body and wand continued to merge and his arm seemed to have a wood-like appearance. This allowed him to create new spells much easier as he got older. Another type of magic Briarbuck House learned was that of runic magic, where a spell is bound to a series of symbols that can be activated upon contact or with a thought if done by a wizard. The elements of these rune spells took a lot of work and a lot of time to make. On top of this, the makers of the rune must pour in their own arcana into the spell / rune to make, therefore it was incredibly taxing. This could even be done, as Hoffnung had shown, in the form of a tattoo. Therefore, Briarbuck students were some of the only students to make them, only having 1 or 2 rune tattoos during their time at Hogwarts. Hoffnung had more due to her family being some of the only living wizards who used this kind of magic. Miles, Hoffnung, and Ellie caused plenty of trouble in their first year, along with the other Briarbuck students. However, these 11 and 12-year-old students showed that they were not freaks, but many were something more. Their first year ended without fanfare, and over the next few years, a rumor was created about how the Briarbuck students were meant for something big, or to stop something really bad. This went to the head of many students, either causing them to drop out of school due to fear, or to become overly prideful. Hoffnung, Ellie, and Miles tried to remain grounded as they learned and worked towards graduation. In their second year, new students were sorted into each of the 5 houses of Hogwarts, making Briarbuck House a more of a normal thing. During their second year, the teachers decided that this shake-up of teachings was helpful and needed at Hogwarts. And then in their third year, Professor Longbottom led a change in curriculum throughout every aspect of the school. They updated the curriculum, their practices, spells, and tried to progress the school into the modern era. There were a few articles written in the Daily Prophet about this change in magic and the rebellions popping up. However, most chalked it up to the normal embellishments of the prophet. There were a few that did believe them, maybe a little too much, but as was the case with most articles from the Daily Prophet. It seemed as though Briarbuck was something amazing and had changed many things, but the students hadn't quite saved the world just yet.